When my landlord banged on my door at 3 in the morning, I jumped out of bed thinking something was on fire. He was standing in the hallway, sweating and shaking, and before I could say anything, he said, "Pack everything. You have 10 minutes to leave." I thought he was joking, but his face told me he wasn't. I asked, "What's going on? Did something happen?" He looked over his shoulder, like he was afraid someone might hear, then whispered, "The previous tenant just knocked on my door." I froze. The previous tenant, the one who had died in my apartment 6 months before I moved in. Before I tell you what happened that night, make sure to subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. What you're about to hear still keeps me awake some nights. My name is Rachel Voss, and I had been living alone for almost a year when that night happened. I worked from home as a freelance designer, so I spent most days in my apartment, drinking coffee, sketching on my tablet, and talking to my cat, Juniper. It wasn't exciting, but it was peaceful, exactly what I needed after moving away from my old life. The apartment itself wasn't perfect. It was an older brick building in a quiet corner of Seattle, the kind of place with creaky floors, dim hallways, and windows that rattled when the wind picked up. But it had charm. My landlord, David Langley, was one of those serious, old-fashioned men who didn't smile much, but always showed up when you needed something fixed. I moved in during the fall. The rent was cheaper than I expected for the area, and when I asked why, David just said, "It's an old building. People don't like the noise." At first, he was right. I'd hear pipes groaning at night, a few creaks in the walls, sometimes even faint knocking sounds, but I grew used to it. Everyone who's lived in an old apartment knows those strange, rhythmic noises that never quite make sense. Still, there were moments that made me pause. Every few nights, around the same time, 3 in the morning, the light in my hallway would flicker for a few seconds, then steady itself again. I figured it was just bad wiring. The thought of ghosts or curses never crossed my mind. My sister, Ava, used to tease me about living there. "You in that creepy old place again?" She'd laugh whenever we talked on the phone. "It's fine," I'd tell her. "It's quiet, and I actually sleep better here." She'd sigh. "Just be careful. You attract weird situations." I laughed at that, but part of me knew she wasn't wrong. I didn't know then that the apartment had a history, or that the room I slept in every night had once belonged to a woman named Melissa Ward. David never mentioned her when I signed the lease. He didn't have to. Her death had been ruled an accident, something about a gas leak, long before I ever moved in. I only found out weeks later when a neighbor mentioned it in passing. The way people bring up gossip without realizing they've said too much. "You're in Melissa's old unit," the woman across the hall told me casually one afternoon. "That poor girl. She was only 28. They say she died in her sleep." I remember forcing a polite smile, pretending not to care, but later that night, I Googled her name. The article was short. "Local woman found dead in apartment. No signs of foul play." There was a small photo of her smiling with a dog, and something about her eyes in that picture unsettled me. It felt like she was looking right through the screen. After that, every time the hallway light flickered or the walls creaked, I thought of her. But I told myself it was silly. People die in homes all the time, and life goes on. I had rent to pay, work to do, and no reason to let someone else's past scare me. For months, everything was normal. I worked, slept, and barely thought about Melissa. Until one cold February night when the knocking started again, not from the hallway this time, but from somewhere inside my apartment. 3 short knocks, then silence. Juniper's ears perked up, and she hissed, staring at the closet door. I turned on every light, grabbed my phone, and stood there listening, but nothing else happened. I finally convinced myself it was the building settling again and went back to bed. The next few nights were quiet. I started to feel silly for being scared, but exactly 1 week later, at 3 in the morning, someone started pounding on my door, hard. I jumped out of bed, heart racing, and opened the door to find David standing there, his face pale, his eyes wide with panic. "Pack your things," he said, breathing hard. "Leave right now." I stared at him, half asleep and terrified. "What are you talking about? What happened?" He looked at me, his voice shaking as he said, "The previous tenant just knocked on my door." I didn't understand. Melissa, that's impossible. He nodded before I could finish. I know, he whispered. That's why you need to leave. I remember standing in that doorway, half asleep, staring at David like he had lost his mind. The hallway light above us buzzed faintly, flickering in short bursts, and his face looked almost gray under it. He wasn't drunk, and he wasn't joking. His hands were shaking. I could see his knuckles turning white around the flashlight he held. David, what are you talking about? I asked again. Who knocked on your door? He took a deep breath and said, I don't know how to explain this to you, Rachel, but I saw her. Melissa. She was standing right outside my apartment. Same clothes she wore the night she died. For a moment, all I could do was stare at him. That's not possible, I said. She's dead. You told me she died in her sleep. He nodded slowly, his eyes darting around the hallway like he was expecting something to appear. I know what I told you, but she's back. I heard the knocking at 3 sharp. When I opened the door, she was standing there, pale as paper, just looking at me. I slammed the door shut and came straight here. It sounded insane, but the way he said it, the way his voice cracked, made my chest tighten. He wasn't lying. He believed it. I told him I needed a few minutes to think. He grabbed my arm and said, You don't have minutes. Whatever's in there isn't meant to stay. Something about that word, whatever, sent chills through me. I looked past him into the hallway. Every door was shut, every light dim. It was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I finally said, Just let me grab my cat and my keys. He nodded and stepped back. When I turned into my apartment, the air felt heavier, like walking into a place that had been sealed for years. My phone screen lit up the living room. 3:04 a.m. Juniper was hiding under the couch, her tail puffed up. I called her name softly, but she wouldn't move. That's when I noticed something on the floor near the door. A single wet footprint, barefoot. It was small, feminine, and led toward my bedroom. I froze. My breath hitched, and for a second, I thought maybe I had stepped in something earlier and tracked it in, but I wasn't barefoot. I still had socks on. I backed away and called out, David, come here. No response. I turned toward the door, but the hallway outside was empty. I didn't even hear his footsteps. It was like he'd vanished. Panic set in. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but before I could dial, the screen glitched. The display flickered, and my wallpaper changed for half a second. Instead of my normal home screen, there was an image I didn't recognize. A photo of my apartment from the hallway, taken from outside my door. The timestamp showed 2:59 a.m. My stomach dropped. Someone had been standing outside my door moments before the knocking started. I called Ava, my sister, shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. She answered groggily, Rachel, what's wrong? There's something happening here, I said. David came banging on my door saying he saw Melissa. I think someone's in the building. Ava tried to stay calm. Call the police right now. Don't stay there another minute. I'm trying, I said, my voice cracking, but my phone just froze. That's when the lights went out. All of them. The apartment fell completely dark except for the faint glow from the streetlight outside my window. The air grew colder, not just chilly, but breath-stealing cold, like stepping into a freezer. Juniper hissed and darted into the bedroom. I turned toward the sound, and for a moment, I saw a shadow move near the wall. It wasn't a reflection. It was darker than the rest of the room, almost shaped like a person. My chest tightened as I whispered, Who's there? No answer. Just a soft, slow knock from inside the wall. 3 times, steady and deliberate. I backed up toward the door, shaking so hard my teeth hurt. The knocking came again, this time from closer, near the closet. I grabbed my phone and used the flashlight to shine across the room. The beam landed on the closet door. It was slightly open, even though I was sure I'd closed it earlier. The gap was small, maybe 2 inches, just enough for me to see darkness beyond. Something inside me said, Don't look, just leave. But curiosity and fear fought inside me. I reached out and slowly pushed the door open. Nothing, just coats, shoes, boxes. I started to exhale when something caught my eye, a handprint on the inside wall. It was smeared, like someone had pressed their palm there while pushing. Right beside it was another, smaller, lighter one. Then came a whisper, faint, close, right behind me. Don't go. I spun around, but no one was there. My phone slipped from my hand and clattered on the floor, the light landing on the open doorway. The beam flickered across the wall, and for a split second, I saw it. A face reflected in the window glass, pale and expressionless. I ran. I didn't even stop to grab Juniper. I sprinted down the hallway barefoot, my heart pounding in my throat. When I reached the front of the building, I saw David outside leaning against his truck, his face buried in his hands. When he saw me, he said, "I told you, she's still here." That night, I didn't go back inside, but the worst part came the next morning, when I went back with the police. They searched my apartment top to bottom. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing. Except for one thing, the handprints in the closet. They were still there. The officer asked how long they'd been on the wall. I said I didn't know. He frowned and said, "That's impossible. These aren't from last night. The paint's dry. These were sealed under the paint years ago." That's when I realized what I'd seen wasn't someone breaking in. It was something that had never left. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something in that apartment wanted to be found, or wanted me gone. The police didn't believe much of what I said. The officer who took my statement chalked it up to exhaustion and stress, maybe mixed with a bit of imagination from being alone too much. "Old buildings creak," he said. "Maybe you had a nightmare and panicked." But I knew what I saw. The handprints under the paint proved that whatever had happened in that apartment wasn't just in my head. I stayed with my sister Ava for 2 nights after the police left, but I couldn't stop thinking about Melissa Ward. The name kept circling in my mind, along with that whisper, "Don't go." It didn't feel threatening. It felt desperate, like she wanted me to know something. On the 3rd morning, Ava sat across from me at the kitchen table. "You need to forget that place," she said. "You got lucky nothing. Worse happened. Move out. Start over." "I can't," I said, pushing my coffee mug aside. "Something's not right about her death. What if she's still there because no one ever told the truth?" Ava sighed, rubbing her forehead. "You're not a detective, Rachel." "Maybe not," I said, "but I can't just walk away." That same day, I went back to the building. The hallways looked normal again. Bright lights, quiet neighbors, the usual scent of old carpet and cleaning solution, but I felt eyes on me the whole time. When I passed David's office on the 1st floor, he looked up sharply. "You shouldn't be here," he said flatly. "I'm just getting the rest of my things," I said. He stood up. "No, you're not. You're looking for her." I didn't deny it. "You know something about what happened to Melissa, don't you?" His jaw clenched. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he said quietly, "She wasn't supposed to die here. I told her to leave that night too." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "She called me after midnight, crying," he said. "Said she heard knocking in the walls, that someone was whispering her name. I thought it was the gas leak. I told her to get out, but when I got here, it was too late. The door was locked from the inside." "Locked from the inside?" I repeated. He nodded. "The police said she was dead before she hit the floor. They blamed the carbon monoxide, but the coroner's report didn't make sense. There were bruises on her wrists, like someone had grabbed her." A chill ran through me. "You're saying someone was in the apartment?" "I'm saying I don't know," he said, voice trembling. "But that place doesn't want to stay quiet." I left his office with my heart pounding. If Melissa's death wasn't an accident, someone had covered it up. That night, I opened my laptop and searched everything I could find about her. Most articles said the same thing: tragic death, faulty heater, no foul play. But in an old forum for local tenants, I found something strange. A comment from a user named L. Ward, posted a week before she died. "Does anyone else hear knocking through the walls at night? It stops when I get close, but I can feel it vibrate through the floor. I keep smelling perfume, like someone's standing behind me. My landlord says it's just the pipes, but I think he's lying." I sat back, goosebumps covering my arms. Perfume. I remembered that same faint floral scent lingering in the air that night, the one that didn't belong to me. The next day, I called the detective who had handled Melissa's case, Detective Harper. She agreed to meet me for coffee. Harper was calm, direct. the kind of person who'd seen enough to recognize when something didn't add up. "I remember that case," she said after I explained everything. "I always thought there was more to it, but without proof, we couldn't reopen it. What made you start looking into it now?" I told her about the knocking, the footprints, and the handprints beneath the paint. Her expression darkened. "Did you say the paint covered the handprints?" "Yes." She leaned closer. "That means they were painted over after she died. Someone tried to hide them." We both sat in silence for a moment, the noise of the cafe fading into the background. Harper finally said, "If you're willing, I'll help you, but I need you to stay somewhere safe tonight." That evening, I drove back to the apartment with Harper and David. He seemed nervous, muttering under his breath as we climbed the stairs. When we entered my unit, the air was still, the way it gets before a storm. Harper went straight to the closet and ran her fingers along the inside wall. Then she knocked softly, listening. "There's a hollow section here," she said. "Something's behind this wall." David's face turned pale. "No one's been inside there since the renovation." Harper took out a small flashlight and crouched down. "Then we're going to see why." She pressed on a corner of the wall until a piece of plaster cracked away. Behind it was a small hidden panel, one I'd never noticed. When she pulled it open, dust spilled out into the air. Inside was a narrow crawl space no bigger than a closet. A faint smell of perfume drifted out, the same scent I'd smelled before. I stepped back, my pulse pounding. Harper shone the flashlight in, and I saw faint scratches on the wood inside, like fingernail marks. In the far corner was something small, wrapped in fabric. Harper reached in carefully and pulled it out. It was a notebook, old and stained, with MW written on the cover. As Harper opened it, the first page read, "If someone finds this, please tell the truth. He's still here." That was the moment I stopped thinking this was a haunting. It wasn't a ghost story anymore. It was something real, something human, and far more dangerous than I'd imagined. The night we found the notebook, everything changed. I couldn't sleep. The words on the first page haunted me. "He's still here." Those 3 words echoed through my head again and again. Detective Harper had taken the notebook with her to examine it, promising to call the next day. But I couldn't wait that long. I needed to know what Melissa had written inside, what she had gone through before she died. Something deep inside me told me that her story hadn't ended in that apartment, and that someone, or something, had made sure of it. By the next afternoon, Harper called. Her voice was low and serious. "Rachel, there's something in that notebook you need to hear. Can you meet me at the station?" When I got there, she slid the small brown journal across the desk. The pages were yellowed, stained with water, and something darker. She started writing about strange noises 2 weeks before she died, Harper explained. But it wasn't just knocking. She thought someone was getting inside her apartment. I flipped through the pages, my heart racing as I read Melissa's shaky handwriting. "I hear breathing near the wall at night. My things keep moving. My door locks when I'm inside. I told David, but he doesn't believe me. I think it's him." I froze and looked up at Harper. She thought David was doing this? Harper nodded. She suspected him, yes. But there's more. Near the end, she wrote about a man she'd met while living there, a repairman named Ron. She said he had a key to every unit because he worked maintenance for the old building owner before David took over. The problem is, there's no record of a Ron ever working here. I swallowed hard. So who was he? Harper looked at me steadily. That's what we're going to find out. That evening, we went back to the building together. David met us at the entrance, looking even more uneasy than before. "What's this about?" he asked. Harper held up the notebook. "You told us no one else had access to the apartment, but Melissa wrote about someone named Ron. Do you know who that is?" David frowned, rubbing his temples. "Ron Baker. He worked for my father before he passed away. We fired him years ago." "Why?" Harper pressed. David hesitated. "He started showing up drunk, broke into one of the empty units once. I told him if I ever caught him here again, I'd call the cops." My stomach twisted. "And where is he now?" David shook his head. "No idea. He disappeared after Melissa's death." Harper's eyes narrowed. Or he didn't disappear. He hid. We climbed the stairs to my apartment again. The same creaky steps, the same musty air. Harper moved with purpose, scanning every inch of the hallway while David lingered behind. Inside, the room looked just as I had left it, except for one small thing. The closet door was open again. I knew I had shut it before we left. Harper noticed too. She raised her flashlight and stepped closer. The beam caught something new, faint scuff marks on the floor leading from the closet to the far wall. She crouched down, tapping on the baseboard. A dull, hollow sound echoed back. "There's another space behind this," she said. She pulled out her small utility knife and began prying the edge of the panel. It cracked with a dry snap, and when she pulled it open, a foul, stale air rushed out, thick with the smell of rot and something chemical. She shone her light inside. My breath caught. There was a narrow tunnel hidden behind the wall, leading downward. It was barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. The walls were scratched and smeared, like someone had used it to move between units. David stepped back, his face pale. "I didn't know about that," he said quickly. "I swear I didn't." Harper didn't answer. She crouched down, flashlight steady, and peered into the tunnel. The beam caught something glinting in the dark, a small metal object. She reached in carefully and pulled it out. It was a key ring. 5 old keys, rusted but still labeled. Each tag had a number on it, one for every apartment in the building. He still had access, Harper said, under her breath. The sound of footsteps suddenly echoed from the hallway outside. Heavy, slow steps. Harper motioned for silence. I turned off the flashlight, and we stood completely still, listening. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. Then, 3 slow knocks. Harper drew her weapon and stepped toward the door. "Seattle Police," she called. "Identify yourself." No answer. She opened the door in one quick motion, but the hallway was empty. The only sound was the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. When we turned back into the apartment, the closet door had swung completely open. The tunnel inside was darker than before, as if swallowing the light. Harper moved closer to check it again, and that's when we heard a noise from deep inside. A low, rasping breath. I felt my blood run cold. Harper aimed her flashlight into the tunnel. For a second, we saw nothing. Then 2 eyes flashed back at us from the dark. She shouted, "Police! Come out now!" A figure moved, fast, crawling toward the light. Harper grabbed me by the arm and yanked me backward. A man emerged from the crawl space, filthy, wild-eyed, his face covered in grime. His clothes were torn, his beard thick and matted. David gasped, "Ron?" The man let out a guttural sound and lunged, but Harper tackled him before he reached us. I stumbled back against the wall, shaking as she cuffed him. He kept muttering under his breath, his words slurred but chillingly clear. "She was mine. She wouldn't leave. I kept her here. I'll keep her again." My knees nearly gave out. It wasn't a ghost that haunted that apartment. It was a man. He had been living inside the walls all this time. When the other officers arrived and dragged him out, I finally saw his face clearly under the light. He looked almost human again, but his eyes, they were empty, cold. Harper turned to me and said quietly, "You were right. Melissa didn't die alone. He killed her, and he stayed here, waiting." That night, as I stood outside watching the police tape go up, I realized the truth. Melissa's spirit hadn't been warning me to leave. She had been begging me to find her. The knocking, the whispers, the footprints. It had all been her way of reaching out, asking someone to finish what she couldn't. And for the first time, I felt something other than fear inside that place. I felt gratitude. After they took Ron away, I stood outside the building until sunrise. The flashing lights from the police cars painted the street in red and blue, and the crowd of curious neighbors whispered in the cold air. I couldn't move. Every sound felt heavy. I kept staring at the window of my apartment, the place I had called home, now just another crime scene. For the first time since I moved in, it felt completely lifeless. Detective Harper came out of the building and handed me a blanket. "He confessed," she said quietly. "He's been living in the walls for months, maybe even before you moved in. He said he used the old maintenance tunnels from the renovation years ago. He watched Melissa through those walls before she died." I didn't speak. I couldn't. The idea of him being there, so close, listening to me breathe, watching me sleep, it made my skin crawl. Harper's voice softened. He wasn't haunting you. Melissa was. She was trying to warn you. That realization hit me harder than anything else. I had been afraid of her, the one person who had never wanted to hurt me. She had tried to help, even from beyond. The next few days passed in a blur. Reporters called. Neighbors stopped me in the hallway to ask what I'd seen. I didn't answer anyone. I just packed my things and left. The only sound in that apartment on my last day was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft jingle of Juniper's collar. Even she seemed relieved to go. Ava helped me move into a small rental house on the other side of the city. It wasn't fancy, but it was quiet and clean. I slept on the couch for the first few nights, afraid of walls and locked doors. Every creak made my heart jump. Every shadow made me check twice. But slowly, I started to breathe again. About a week later, Detective Harper called to tell me that the forensics team had confirmed everything. Melissa's blood was found inside the hidden crawl space. She had been attacked and dragged there. Ron Baker had hidden the evidence, sealed the tunnel, and stayed in the building ever since. The bruises on Melissa's wrists matched his fingerprints. He hadn't been gone. He had been waiting. Hearing it confirmed should have made me feel better, but it didn't. It just made me realize how close I had come to being next. That night, I found myself sitting by the window with Juniper on my lap. The street outside was calm, the sound of rain tapping softly against the glass. I took a deep breath, trying to feel the peace I had been missing. Then I thought of Melissa. She had been trapped there, terrified and alone. Yet somehow, she found a way to reach me, to keep me from suffering the same fate. She didn't let her story end in silence. A few weeks later, I decided to visit her grave. It was a quiet cemetery just outside the city. I brought white lilies, her favorite flowers according to the articles I'd read. Standing there, I felt a strange calm settle over me. "I found him," I whispered. "You can rest now." A light breeze brushed through the trees, and for a brief second, I caught the faint scent of perfume, the same one I'd smelled in that apartment. But this time, it didn't scare me. It felt warm, peaceful, like a goodbye. When I returned home, that night, I finally unpacked the last box and hung my favorite painting on the wall. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without waking up. No knocking, no whispers, no cold air pressing against my skin. Still, sometimes when I close my eyes, I think about how easily evil hides in plain sight. It doesn't always come from ghosts or shadows. Sometimes it's just a person who knows where you live, who holds the keys to your door, and who waits for you to stop paying attention. That experience changed me forever. I lock every door twice now. I keep lights on when I sleep. But more than that, I listen to my instincts. That uneasy feeling you get, the one that makes you look over your shoulder. It's not paranoia, it's protection. I tell my story now not to scare people, but to remind them that the smallest signs matter. The flickering light, the unexplained noise, the gut feeling that something isn't right. They all mean something. I ignored them once. I won't ever again. Melissa's death wasn't in vain. Her warning saved me, and telling her story feels like a way of finally giving her peace. Before you go, remember this. If something doesn't feel right, don't brush it off. Listen to that voice inside. It could be the one thing that keeps you safe. If this story kept you hooked, take a second to subscribe to my channel for more real stories that will keep you thinking long after they end. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore your instincts. Because sometimes, the scariest things aren't from the other side. They're standing right next to you, waiting for the lights to go out.